How to use apple cider vinegar safely for amazing health benefits. Discover the best ways to enjoy apple cider vinegar without side effects. Apple cider vinegar tips. Every health lover must know the safe guide to apple cider vinegar for weight loss and digestion. How to incorporate apple cider vinegar safely into your daily routine. The truth about apple cider vinegar, safe uses and benefits. Safe apple cider vinegar hacks for glowing skin and better digestion. How to get the most health benefits from apple cider vinegar safely. Apple cider vinegar do's and don'ts for a healthy lifestyle. Natural ways to use apple cider vinegar safely for your immune system. How to safely use apple cider vinegar for blood sugar control. Easy and safe apple cider vinegar recipes for beginners. Avoid common mistakes when using apple cider vinegar for health. Step-by-step guide using apple cider vinegar safely every day. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for improving gut health. How to balance apple cider vinegar in your diet safely. Apple cider vinegar safe uses for reducing inflammation. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for heart health. Simple ways to enjoy apple cider vinegar safely and effectively. The ultimate safe apple cider vinegar routine for beginners. Why safety matters when using apple cider vinegar daily. Safe apple cider vinegar drinks you can make at home. How to dilute apple cider vinegar for safe consumption. Apple cider vinegar safe usage for better skin and hair. What you need to know about apple cider vinegar and safety safe timing. When and how to take apple cider vinegar. How to avoid stomach issues with apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar safety tips from nutrition experts. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for detoxification. Safe apple cider vinegar for weight loss. What to do and what to avoid. How much apple cider vinegar is safe to consume daily. Apple cider vinegar safety. Facts versus myths. How to safely add apple cider vinegar to your salad dressings. Why you should never drink apple cider vinegar undiluted. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for better digestion. Safe apple cider vinegar uses to support your metabolism. How to prevent acid reflux when using apple cider vinegar. The safest ways to use apple cider vinegar for oral health. How to safely combine apple cider vinegar with other supplements. Apple cider vinegar safety tips for diabetics. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for natural energy boosts. Safe apple cider vinegar practices for reducing bloating. How to keep apple cider vinegar safe and effective in your kitchen. Safe apple cider vinegar uses for controlling cholesterol. How to use apple cider vinegar safely to improve skin clarity. Apple cider vinegar safety tips for people with sensitive stomachs. Safe apple cider vinegar recipes for morning detox drinks. How to avoid tooth enamel damage when using apple cider vinegar. Safe apple cider vinegar uses for boosting immunity. How to safely use apple cider vinegar for sinus relief. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for balancing pH levels. How to make apple cider vinegar tonics safely at home. Safe apple cider vinegar for weight management. Tips and tricks. How to use apple cider vinegar safely during pregnancy. Consult your doctor. Safe apple cider vinegar uses to fight inflammation. Naturally, how to incorporate apple cider vinegar safely into your smoothies. Safe apple cider vinegar for controlling blood pressure. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for natural acne treatment. Safe apple cider vinegar usage for gut flora balance. How to make safe apple cider vinegar hair rinses. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for reducing cellulite. How to use apple cider vinegar safely in your skincare routine. Safe apple cider vinegar for boosting liver health. How to make safe apple cider vinegar drinks for digestion. Safe apple cider vinegar advice for people with acid reflux. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for natural weight loss. Safe apple cider vinegar uses to improve energy and stamina. How to safely prepare apple cider vinegar detox drinks. Safe apple cider vinegar tips to avoid common side effects. How to use apple cider vinegar safely with other natural remedies. Safe apple cider vinegar for fighting infections naturally. How to safely store apple cider vinegar at home. Safe apple cider vinegar for reducing muscle soreness. How to use apple cider vinegar safely to improve sleep quality. Safe apple cider vinegar for improving kidney health. How to safely use apple cider vinegar for healthy blood sugar levels. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for reducing bad breath. How to use apple cider vinegar safely in homemade salad dressings. Safe apple cider vinegar. Advice for long-term health benefits. How to combine apple cider vinegar safely with honey. Safe apple cider vinegar uses for detoxifying your body. How to safely use apple cider vinegar for natural cleansing. Safe apple cider vinegar for improving digestion after meals. How to prevent skin irritation when using apple cider vinegar topically. Safe apple cider vinegar for natural weight control. How to use apple cider vinegar safely in cooking. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for beginners. How to avoid burns when applying apple cider vinegar on skin. Safe apple cider vinegar for boosting metabolism naturally. How to safely incorporate apple cider vinegar into your morning routine. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for overall wellness. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for natural gut health. Safe apple cider vinegar for balancing blood sugar levels naturally. How to make safe apple cider vinegar detox water. Safe apple cider vinegar for reducing inflammation and pain. How to safely use apple cider vinegar for healthy digestion. Safe apple cider vinegar uses for natural skincare. How to use apple cider vinegar safely for daily health maintenance. Safe apple cider vinegar for improved digestion and energy. How to avoid overuse of apple cider vinegar safely. Safe apple cider vinegar tips for weight loss without side effects.